Hey, Jamie here, and welcome to part 3 of Module 10, where we're continuing to break down the offer negotiation. And now in this final part, in part 3, we're actually going to go through more of the step-by-step, how to do the research for the compensation and coming up with a fair market value for your target position where you're, hopefully by this time you have the offer and you're trying to determine how much should I realistically be paid based on what the market is currently paying for this position. But in addition to that, where do I believe I fall on the bell curve? Because again, assuming how you've positioned yourself in the interview, as well as how you want to position yourself in the offer negotiation, is you're not average. And because of that, you're ideally, the proposal that you're going to make is you want to be compensated above average. So we're going to break down how to research and prepare for the offer negotiation, as well as then how to go about practicing for it. Now, again, very similar to your interview prep, you will fall to the highest level of your preparation for your offer negotiation. Now, and I want to include one caveat here. Are you always able to negotiate the offer? No, not always, but it never really hurts to try unless you approach it in a very aggressive or accusational or defensive or argumentative manner. If you approach it with a bad mindset and it's just disrespectful, well, at that point, that actually might hurt your relationship with the company that hopefully you're going to be working there. So as long as you approach it with an open mind, you're understanding their perspective, and it doesn't mean that you're going to bend over backwards to whenever they say no or whatever they say, but it just means that you're approaching it in appreciative, in understanding, and yet a professional yet serious manner. Okay, so again, going back to the framework and kind of the step-by-steps of how we're going to prepare for the offer negotiation, the very first thing you need to do and understand is how much does the market currently pay for this title and this type of position. And it's very important because this might fluctuate from year to year, and it definitely fluctuates depending on cities because of cost of living, etc. So you want to do the research and figure out, in general, what is the fair market value, the fair going compensation for this position. And if you recall from earlier, I showed that you can break down the compensation for a position based on a bell curve. And within the bell curve, there's going to be the 25th percentile, there's going to be average or median within it, and then there's going to be the 75th percentile, and then there's going to be the top earners, or call that the top 10%. And what we want to do is we want to pitch you as above average. Ideally, if the offer negotiation goes well, how you've positioned yourself is, I understand that this is average, but I do believe that I bring more value to the table than the average candidate. And so ideally, what you're shooting for is to be paid above that average or above the median point on this compensation bell curve, regardless of what position you're at. If it's an entry to mid-level position, you still want to shoot for above average. If you're a more senior manager or an executive, well, again, you want to shoot for above average because you've positioned yourself as above average. Now, one caveat here as well, there's always caveats. If you are directly coming out of college or if you're only 1 year out of college, it's much more difficult the earlier you are in your career, only because a lot of companies have very set and rigid and structured programs. So are you always going to be able to negotiate very early in your career? Not necessarily. But again, it's worth the try. Asymmetric upside. I've yet to ever hear of a case where somebody has had their offer rescinded because they tried to negotiate. And I've never heard of that before. So do I believe that there's an enormous amount of risk on the table by you trying to negotiate? Not at all. Absolutely not. If anything, they'll respect you more because they say, wow, here's a go-getter who's early in their career, who's already willing to negotiate. Man, this is going to be a leader. So always be willing to negotiate and don't be afraid of rejection. So what we're trying to create is, and this is for you initially, so this is what you're going to be creating. And what this is, and I'll quickly kind of walk through this. So you can see it says Chicago, Illinois, median base compensation. So this is so my background's in banking, and so I created this, but really you do the exact same thing when you're valuing multi-billion-dollar companies or multi-million-dollar companies. What you're doing is you're creating a range of valuations and then looking at all these different ranges and then determining across all these what is the true mean or median valuation that is arguably the fair market value for this thing, whether it's an asset or a job. It doesn't matter. Valuation stays the same. And so all we're doing here on the right side, you can see that there's multiple different sources with different ranges. So at the very top of the chart, you can see it says Glassdoor.com, 61,002, and then the reason it extends past is if you look at the very bottom x-axis, it only goes to 95,000. And so you can see that the highest range for Glassdoor on the left side, you can see, or actually here, I'll use my mouse. So you can see here, Glassdoor.com, you had the 25th percentile was 61,000. The 75th was 102. And so you can see that 102 is off over here. So, but this is what the chart's showing is 61,000 to 102. And then you have Monster.com. So that was 66,000 to 103. So again, there's that range. And then the US BLS, so the Occupational Handbook, is 47,156. So that was a very large range. And you can see that that's off both sides of the chart. And then Salary List, Indeed, LinkedIn, H-1B data, PayScale, and salary. So these are all different sources that have provided compensation information and bell curve information for this position, financial analyst / senior financial analyst. So all we're doing in this one pager, and that you will be creating this, is you're looking at all these different sources of compensation and then figuring out what is the mean, what is the median, and if it's available off of how many responses or how many reviews or salary inputs have been included in this data. And then we're going to be creating this chart. And I'm going to walk you through step by step exactly how to build this. And then again, or not again, but in this bottom left here, this is just for example, but whichever company you're doing the offer negotiation with, you're going to want to find their logo and include that in the bottom left because it adds a little taste for them that, you do want to work there. Okay, so now I'm going to bring up the actual Excel so that we can go through this step by step and show you how to do that. So you're going to have access to this. So it's the fair market compensation valuation. And on the second tab here, if we go to valuation ranges, you can see that this is the Excel that you'll be using in order to create this. Now, all of these are linked. So salary.com, PayScale, these are all linked directly to the websites for the sources. And then anything that's in blue text or the font color is blue, that means this is a hard input. And a hard input in Excel means that you have physically typed in the number. So you can see there's no formula. It's just 80,178. And the means, you can see here that if it's not given, all it's doing is it's calculating the average between these two. So the 25th and the 75th, okay, well, it's creating a mean or an average of 72,000. And the median this is going to be more often than not given to you. So these should all be blue. 2 seconds here. Okay, so these are all going to be found from the websites because again, to know the median, we have to know all of the individual data entries, and you're not going to have access to that information from the websites. So these will all be manually input. And now the population size, the only time that we can put that in is when the website has given us this information. How many sources of data or data points have been included in these. Okay, and now for here, the mean and median, all these are doing is this is calculating the average of all of these above it. So across all these different sources, what is the total average? And then again, the median, or I'm sorry, the average across all the medians. So we're finding the average for all the medians. And then we also want to find what is the median between all of these. And we want to shoot for the median because the median is a better representation of true value, not average. Because average could be skewed. So for example, one of these was really skewed. So example, salary list, 44,000 to 200,000. Well, there's definitely some outliers in this data. And so a much better representation is going to be the median, because the median will not be skewed by the 200,000 outlier. So really what we want to focus on is this median number. And now this 83,000 and 78,000, so as of, using this data, you can see that that's what this red range is showing on this graph. And really what this red range means is the fair market value for the financial analyst 2 or the senior financial analyst position. It is fair and to be expected that you will be paid somewhere between 78,000 and 83,000, and that is the median for this position. So I hope all that just made sense. And now you can see some of this, and I'll show you that. But now let's go to, so for example, salary.com. So if we want to plug in and find this information, we'd click salary.com. And then you can see I've already preloaded all the websites here. But so we would type in, and let's get that. So senior financial analyst. And let's do research. And then you can see here it pops up. So view salary and benefits, that's an ad. All right, so we want senior financial analyst. So we're going to click that. And then you can see that matches what I previously had. So we have the information of 81,000 to 99,162. Okay, well, so the average senior financial salary is 89,906. Okay. And then the salary ranges typically fall between 81,963 and 99,162. So we would go back and we would say, okay, this is going to be 81,963, 81,963, and then this is going to be 99,162. Now, is this a perfect science? No, this is, I promise you, because we don't know if this is the 25th. It's just saying is roughly between these numbers. So we're going to use these numbers as the low end and the high end. So it's not a perfect science. It never will be. So we're doing 81,963 and then 99,162. And then does it give it the mean? So we're calculating that, and that's 95,663. And that's roughly right in line with that. So we're just going to keep that. And then the median, I don't believe that they provide median here. I don't believe so. So instead what we'll use is we'll just pull this number, the average. So we'll just pull the number that they're giving us as the dead center of their data. So we'll say that's 89,906. Again, it's not a perfect science, and they also don't tell us the population size. They don't tell us the number of data inputs for this data. All right, so boom. So that's salary. And now let's go to PayScale. Now, I believe for PayScale, you have to create an account. It's super easy, takes 5 seconds. I think you can sign up with like Facebook or something, but it's worth it. And you're gonna do, again, put in the title. And now I've already done this, and you're gonna come up with a report that looks like this. So average senior financial analyst salary. And you can see here it has average base salary, and then it says 64,000 is the bottom 10%, 90% is 102. So we're gonna take this as the low end of the high end. So we're gonna go 64,000, and then the high end is 102,000. Okay, so now we have low end, high end. We're calculating the average to be 83, and then they give us the median of 81,362. So we're gonna do 81,362. And now we have that, and then I do believe it gives us there. So you can see where it says based on 9,590 salary profiles last updated December 31, 2020. So this is the number that's the data, the amount of data points or the population size. So we're going to take 9,590 and put that in there. Boom. So now we have PayScale. So now we're going to use H1B data. And this is kind of the messiest part, the messiest data input. It's absolutely not a perfect science here. So we're going to go, I'm going to show you this one. So H1B, and kind of what H1B is it's just based on, I don't know where it's pulling information from, but it's using information that has been provided by companies. So if we do, I believe I have here financial analyst 2. Yep. So I do financial analyst 2, and that's going to pop up here. And I'm going to do 2020 and then click search. So you can see here that it pops up with 57 records from 2020 with the median salary of $85,000. Now here, what I'd done was I used 7 years. So I used 2018 through 2014. So I included all years here. So what I'm going to show you is if we just click all years. So now we go from 57 records to 256 records. So that's a bit better. So let's do that. And so I had already done that here. So now we have 256 records. So now what we need to do is I recommend sorting. So if you just click on here, you can sort by whatever you choose. I recommend sorting by the salary. And then what you're going to do is click above here. So you just click on white space. And then that way, all you're trying to do is highlight all of the information. So you're going to highlight all this information and drag it all the way down to get the 200 and something profiles or data inputs. Okay, so we're going to go to the bottom and then just, copy or Control C or Apple C, whatever computer you're using. And then we're going to go back to here. And now it doesn't tell us the 25th or 75th. It did tell us the median. So what we need to do is the reason we copied it is we need to calculate the 25th and the 75th percentiles. So now I'm just going to paste right here. And so now you can see that it just dumped all of this information from H1B salary database, and it just dumped it all here. And now you can see all the base salaries are here, and they're in order from lowest to highest. So all we're trying to do is, and I've included the formulas here for you to calculate this. So in order to calculate the 25th percentile, we need to use this formula. So quartile or equals quartile.exc, and then we're going to select the array, and the array is going to be all of the salaries. So if I were to select the array, all I'm doing is dragging this all the way down to the very bottom. Now, a much faster way to do that is if you're using an Apple, you want to use the command and then click shift. So command shift and then down arrow. So if you're using a Windows, it's just going to be control shift and then down arrow. And so what that does is it jumps all the way to the bottom and it highlights everything. So that's how we're going to be selecting the array. Okay, so now we're going to go back up to 25th percentile, and I'm going to type in quartile and then EXC. So I'm clicking this or choosing that. And then you can see, quartile, and then array, we're going to go down and select the array. So control shift, and then I'm selecting the whole array. And you can see for me, it's D35 to D290. And then I'm going to put in a little comma. And then you can see here, it tells me if I choose one, it's first quartile, second is the median value, and then third is third quartile. Well, right now we want the first quartile, the 25th percentile. So I'm just going to put in 1. I typed 1 and then enter. And you can see that just told me, all right, so the 25th percentile for all of these salaries, these 256 inputs, is 67,000. Well, now we just want to do the exact same thing for the third, or for the 75th percentile. So again, I'm going to type in quartile, go over, select, and then put in 3. And then you can see here, it's 84,750. So again, the formulas are quartile.exe. You're selecting the array of all of the salaries that you've just pasted below. And then for the 25th percentile, you're including a 1. And then for the 75th percentile, you're selecting the same array, but you're putting a 3 instead of a 1. And the 3 is going to give you 75th. Okay, so now we can use this information and we can go back up to here. So H1B data, where we have 25th percentile, we can do 67,666. And then for the high end, or the 75th, we can do 84,750. And you can see that it's automatically updating the graph over here. Okay, so now for median, or I'm sorry, for mean, average, I keep saying that. For average, it's calculating off of that. But then for the median, it told us. So if we go back to the very top, it told us here that the median was 76,000. So we're going to include that. 76,000. Boom. Okay, so population size we know is 256. So we're going to do 256. All right, boom. So H1B data done. So now we want Indeed. Now Indeed's not the best because it doesn't give us too much info. So what we could do here again, so it's going to bring you to this page, and you just do something like financial analyst, or actually let's do senior financial analyst, and then United States, cool, and then search, boom. All right, so now we see that all it tells us is average base salary. So it's super bleh. It doesn't give us a whole lot of info, and even if you scroll down, it's still not that much. I mean, it just, yeah. So it's not super helpful. So instead, what we're going to do is just take the 90,326, and we're going to put this in here. And that's why I have it as blue, because it's not calculating off of anything. It's a manual input. So I'm putting that as 90,326. Cool. And then median. Well, we don't know median. It doesn't tell us, and there's really no way for us to guesstimate that. So I put not applicable, and that probably doesn't need to be capital. Actually, I don't like capitals. So quickly changing this. Anyways, okay, cool. And then population size, it does tell us, so roughly, so 2.5 thousand. All right, cool. Well, let's use, and actually, all right, so if you, this little question mark, that'll give you the very specific number. So 2,529. We want, the more specific we can get, the better, because it's more believable. So we want 2529. So I'm going to put in 2529, and that's Indeed. Cool. All right, so now let's go to LinkedIn, and I've already done LinkedIn, but again, I just want to show you the quick steps. So it's going to pop up with LinkedIn here, and then if we were to just type in senior financial analyst, that's going to pop up, United States, cool. Search, and then you can see it's going to pop up here with this information. If you just click see more insights, it's going to blow it up and make it much larger. So we can see that the base salary is 85. Okay, well, let's put in 85, which I already had there. And then population size, it should tell us the number of responses. So right here, so it says 5,399 responses. And it also says it up here, 5,399 salaries reported. All right, cool. So 5,399. And then the low end is, let's say, 68,000. And then the high end is 110,000. Awesome. Cool. Okay, so now, and actually, you know what? Let's tighten that up a little bit, because we know that this is 7% and this is 8%. So 7 and 8% is going to be 15%. So I would actually say that the 25th percentile is more in line going to be here. So if anything, let's shoot for, so let's use the bottom end of this. So 76,000. And then the high end is, so this is 3%, 4%, that's 7%. And then 7% is, all right, so that's 14%. And then 22%. So now let's use the low end of here. So 93,000. Let's use that. And again, that was just a rough guesstimate of what is the 25th and what's the 75th percentiles. It's not, I promise it's not going to be a perfect science. All we're looking for is rough valuation ranges that are believable. So 76, 93,000, and then this is calculating the average again. We already put in the median and then the population size. So now for salary list. So if we include this, this is going to be here. And then if you just, in the top right, you can just type in senior financial analyst. That'll pop up. And I'm just using senior financial analyst as an example. Whatever your position is, you're going to be following the same process here. So we're putting that in, and then we click search. And then you can see here it's popping up with all sorts of difference. So senior financial analyst salary search results. So we want the salary results, not the career information. So I'm going to click this first one, senior financial analyst salary. And we can see here it gives us a low, it gives us an average, a median, and a high. So this is the one that I previously shown that was pretty skewed with some big outliers. So salary list, we know it's 44,637. So 44,637, I already had that in there. And then we know that the high is 200,000. So we're putting that in. That was already in there. The mean, which is average, is 89,896. So 89,896, already had that in there. And then for the median, it told us was 88,897. So 88,897, already had that in there. And then for the population size, where is that? Here. So total 936 salaries. So we're just pulling in 936 and then putting that number in there. All right, cool. So now we're moving on to the U.S. Occupational Outlook Handbook. And so when you click that link, it's going to take you to bls.gov/OOH. So you can see it's the Occupational Outlook Handbook. And where it says search handbook, this is where you're just going to type in the title of your position. So senior financial analyst. And again, this is also not a perfect, because what I've found is this website really buckets a lot together. It doesn't individually slice the different types of positions up. So it's very general. So you can see here, all it says is financial analysts. So in this case, it brings us to here. Well, it says the 2019 median pay. So it gives us the information, but there's actually a tab. So right here where the tab says pay, if you click that, it brings it out a little bit more. It gives us a little bit more information. So you can see here where it says pay. Well, the median annual wage for financial analysts was $81,590 in May 2019. Okay, so they also haven't updated this since, well, actually, I take that back, because it says visited December 2020. So it looks like they might have updated it. But either way, this is the most recent data that they have available. So we're going to take the 81,590 and put that in. So 81,000, because they said that was median. And then they haven't given us an average. And they also haven't given us a population size, because I don't believe so they don't include they don't tell us the number of data points. So this is going to be, so we're going to have to come up with these numbers. We're choosing these numbers, the 10 and the low end and the high end. And the way that I pulled this in, and for whatever position you're looking up, it's going to say here, all right, so the lowest 10% earned less than 47,000, and the highest 10% earned more than 156,000. Okay, well, that's a pretty wide range, but it doesn't give us any more detail to do that. So this information is kind of irrelevant, because it only gives us medians for different slices within the industry. Well, we don't want that, because if you're in one of the slices that pays less than the other ones, well, that's not going to help you. So we're just going to use this, so 47 to 156, which is what I had included there. And then this is going to be calculating the average off of those. And so now we have the Occupational Outlook done. So Monster. So click that link, and that's going to bring up monster.com. And you can see this is pretty repetitive, but the only reason you're doing this is it's going to be giving you different sources of information, which is very, very helpful, because we never want to look at just one source of information. We want multiple sources with ranges, and then we can negotiate within the range. All right, so this is saying we need a location. So just as an example, I'm going to choose Chicago. All right, so find salary. And so this is taking a little bit. What's going to happen is it's going to pull up a sheet that looks like this, or a page that looks like this. So it tells us, all right, so senior financial analyst, it tells us the median, the low, and the high. Great. So we're going to take the median, which we know is 80,111, so 80,111. And then it says the low was 67,297, so 67,297. And then the high was 104,277, 104,277. All right, now it doesn't tell us population size either, or the number of data points. So for that one, we have to leave that out. So that's Monster, and then we can use Glassdoor. And so this is the final one. So now we can put in senior financial analyst. And instead of New York, by default, I'm going to just type in United States. So I get the whole US and then click search. Boom. So now it says senior financial analyst salaries in the US. And you can see here 45,992 salaries updated that date. Okay, great. This is good. I mean, this is a very large data set. And if you think about what are companies looking at, companies are most likely going to be looking at LinkedIn as well as Glassdoor because they're very large data sets. So we know that 45,992. So let's update that. 45,992. I think I already had that. And then average. So this is just giving us average. All right, let's start with low and high. So we know 61,102. So 61,102 already had those. So we're just going to be calculating the average off of those. And then for the median, it doesn't tell us what the median specifically is, but instead it's giving us their calculated average. Okay, so in that case, what we're going to do is kind of similar to what we had done before. Again, it's not a perfect science. We're going to use their midpoint range, and we're going to put in 77,831. So again, it's not perfect, but that's what we're gonna go with. Okay, so now we're calculating as we always showed, and so now we're getting a median for these two between the averages and the medians. So we're getting 81,000 to 85,000. So all we're gonna do is update this red to show that that's the rough range that we're shooting for. So this is the chart. If you were to look at this, so you can move this chart anywhere you want. So this is just a free flowing chart. And then these lines, the red lines are, whoops, let's go back. These red lines are also individual bars that you just move around. So again, it's very editable. You can edit this however you want. And so if we know that the top range is going to be 85, we're going to move this just about to where 85,000 is. So just above, so 85,787. So again, we're going to move that. It's imprecise. We're just showing the range. And then we know that this lower range here, so this is the high part of the range, 81,000 is the low part of the range. So we're going to take this and move this to where we believe 81,000 is. So if this bottom part here, so it says 81,963, well, that's where that blue is. So I'm just going to move this just below that. All right, so now you can see I can't click that shaded region in the back. Well, all I need to do is click on the chart itself, right click, and where it says send to back, you can just send the whole chart to the back. Now you can select the shaded area and move that in between the bars. And if you need to make this wider, you can make this wider. So you can make it however wide you want. And then we're just going to move this in between the bars so it looks like one unit. Boom. Okay, cool. Now you can see that the chart is in the background. We don't want the chart in the background. We want the shaded region in the back. So now we're just going to right click again and then click send to back. And now you can see the shaded region is in the back. Boom. So now what we're going to do is we need to replace this box with logo. So let's just make this easy. And let's go to Google and just type in Google logo. And you're going to want to go to images. So whatever your company's name is, you just type in the company name and do logo. And then I recommend if you click tools, you can see that it says size, color, type, time. So color, you can type or click transparent. And when you do that, it's going to give you all sorts of transparent logos. Well, we know that this is Google's logo. So I'm just going to come over here, right click, copy image, and then go back to here. I'm going to delete this little box, and then I'm going to paste in Google's logo. And so now we have this. Well, that looks pretty nice. Size that a little bit. And then what we're going to do is we're going to copy all this and put it as a picture into a slide. So you're also going to have access to this PowerPoint page. And all you're going to be doing, you can see this is just an image of the previous example. So all we're doing is updating this image. So we're going to go back to the Excel and we're going to go to row number 4. So right here, row number 4, cell B4, you're going to click there and then highlight to right about here, row 26. So row 26 to S, call it. Yeah, because you don't want to cut off the 99,000 there. So we're going to do that. So all you're doing is Command C or Control C, whatever you're using. You're copying all this information. And then you're going back to your PowerPoint and you're going to right click, and where it says change picture, you're going to go to the bottom where it says from clipboard, and that's it. So change picture from clipboard, and then voila, you have a beautiful visual range of the fair market value for your target position. And so wherever you're located, and also too, you saw in those different sources, so salary, PayScale, H1B, Indeed, LinkedIn, like you can get even more specific in the data. So depending on where you live, I mean, feel free to make it more specific. And then as of, and then you just update this for whatever the time frame is that you're watching this and you're doing this research. Okay, so this is going to be, it starts for you. The reason you want to do this is this gives you a very clear understanding of what should I be making, what should I be paid for this position. This is very important because this is going to give you the context to know what is a realistic ask or a proposal for your compensation. Okay, so now we're going to go back to the presentation. And so the second thing you're going to do is list and prioritize the most important negotiation goals that you're focused on, both monetary and non-monetary. Following that, you're going to draft your open-ended what and how questions, and that's for the first conversation where you're going to be asking more. You're asking questions to make sure you fully understand everything about the offer, as well as understand some of their thoughts on the offer. So some examples, and I've included these in the worksheet prep sheet, or the negotiation prep sheet. But some examples here are what parts of this offer may be open for negotiation, as I'm sure your team might have some constraints that I'm unaware of. What's most important and the least flexible to your team for this offer? How was the offer compensation determined for this position? What's the total compensation for this position, including bonuses, performance initiatives, or any other incentives? And then how does your team take into consideration the differences in performance for this position? And what other benefits outside of compensation are the most important to consider in this offer? So these are just examples. These are not the only questions you will want to ask. And maybe given your situation, depending on who the employer is, what conversations you've had in the past, maybe some of these may not even be the best questions for you to ask. So next is step 4, prepare and practice summarizing their responses at the end of the call for that's right. So again, the first conversation is to make sure that you fully understand the offer itself, but then also what are their thoughts around the offer. And then you want to summarize back to them to make sure that they know that you're coming from a place of understanding and you understand why they did what they did, why they offered what they have. So then we're going to prepare how to position your proposal to align with their interests, because you'll have a better understanding of their interests after you've asked your open-ended questions, your what and how questions. And then 6 is you want to prepare for their responses, how you'll respond, and the questions you'll ask. Because when you make your proposal, they're going to respond. And most likely that response might be an objection or a rejection. And so you're going to want to think through ahead of time, well, what am I going to say if or when they say this? So you're thinking ahead. It's kind of like playing chess. 7 is you want to prepare for when you'll leverage your research and competitive offers. So this research sheet that you're doing, this little valuation analysis that you're doing for your position, you're not going to immediately, put this in their face and say, hey, I know that I should be paid this because I've done the research. That's almost too aggressive. So instead, in the conversation, you're making the proposal first. And then if they were to come back later and say, no, we're not willing to pay that, or we don't think that's reasonable, or that's not fair, or we've done the research and that is much higher than we think. Well, in that case, you can rebuttal. And again, you're always doing this politely in an understanding tone that's cooperative, and you're trying to come to an agreement with them. That's where you can bring this information up and say, based on the research I've done and I've looked at multiple different sources and I've actually done my own compensation analysis, I'd be happy to share it with you. But I'm seeing that really the range that, again, falling within where I believe I should be paid or my proposal is X to Y. So 7 is you want to think through when would I bring that out? And then the second part is when would I want to mention that I have competitive offers? Now, if they're looking to do a very quick turnaround, well, in some cases, you might need to bring up the fact that you have competitive offers in that first conversation to get things moving. So you'll want to think through, when do I want to use these two strategic pieces of information? The research you've done as well as your competitive offers. And then another thing you want to do is point out or put down, what is your walk away point? There are some opportunities that you may really want, but you know you are being underpaid by 15, 20, 30% of what market value is. Well, you need to determine at what point do I know I'm not being compensated fairly. And this is totally up to you. This is very subjective because some people, if you're trying to break into an extremely competitive, very difficult field, and you know that, if you turn this down, you might not even get in. Well, in that case, the compensation is going to be a lot less important than getting the position itself. So you're going to want to think through, what is a walk away point for me? And it might be a really low number. That's okay. It might be a really high number, depending on what you know you're worth and where you are in your career. But you must know your walk away point. And then the only caveat here as well is unless it's a sustenance position. So if it's a sustenance position, you're not doing it to make as much money as you're literally doing or taking the position to pay your bills. So if it's a sustenance position, always keep in mind the purpose behind that position. It's not a dream job. It's not your long-term career. You might only be there for 2 or 3 months. It's to pay the bills. Okay, so now 9, but also going back to the sustenance position, you should still try to negotiate because, again, the worst thing they can do is say no. I've never heard of anyone having their offer rescinded by trying to negotiate. Okay, and then finally is 9, practice, practice, practice. You want to practice asking your questions. You want to practice responding to them. And you also want to practice stating your proposal. And I know this sounds kind of ridiculous, but sometimes people get very hesitant or they stutter when they say large numbers because they almost feel greedy. And it's not greed. It's if you know that your skills, your knowledge, your education, your background, and your ability to perform above average, if you know what you're truly worth, you should not be afraid to ask for, I really appreciate you guys sending this offer. I'm very excited about potentially working on your team. One thing I would like to propose, though, is a slight adjustment in the compensation. Well, they might ask, okay, what did you have in mind? And you say, based on the research I've done, as well as some other competitive offers, I'd like to propose a compensation range between X and Y. Well, sometimes saying those numbers, that might be 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 grand, 50 grand above where they're offering. Well, a lot of people get really hesitant to say those numbers. And when they say it on the call, because they haven't practiced saying that number repeatedly, they almost like stutter. And it comes across as very unconfident and a lack of self-confidence. Well, the company knows that you're not confident in that number. They're going to be a lot less willing to budge because they know that you don't have leverage on them. So always make sure that how you're approaching this conversation is a tone of understanding and cooperation. You're very appreciative and excited and interested in the opportunity. You're pleasant and respectful, but you're also serious and you're confident about the value that you are bringing to them and the value that you're asking for. So you cannot be afraid to negotiate for what you're worth. Never, ever, ever, ever forget that you are a service provider. You are a business in the marketplace, and you must respect yourself as a for-profit business. You're taking this job not only because it's something that you really want, but you also are in the business of making money. That's why you're working. So the two big goals for you in your career are, one, do fulfilling and purpose-driven work you love to do, where you know that you can achieve your greatest potential because you bring a natural enthusiasm and energy for the work that other people can't even match. Well, that's one big piece of the equation, the deliberate purpose. But then the strategic growth, which is how can you make money? How can you build your wealth? Well, you need to be willing to ask for and negotiate for what you know that you're worth. Okay, so now we have the actual worksheet for you to work through step by step. So I'm going to bring that up, and that is here. So many tabs open. Okay, all right, so you can see here, this is what you're going to have access to. So offer negotiation worksheet, and I've laid out here the steps again. So research fair market value for your position and prepare valuation summary sheet. Well, we just talked about that, how to do that, and I walked you through that step by step. And then list and prioritize your most important negotiation goals, monetary, non-monetary. And so, all right, so we just walked through these. And then included here several points for the first conversation, several points to think about and be prepared for the second conversation. And now I've included the links there for the fair market valuation. And those are the same links that are in the Excel. And then 2, list and prioritize your most important negotiation goals. So here, if you remember from part 2, I laid out all of the different things that you could potentially negotiate as part of your compensation and benefits package. Well, those are all laid out here again. So you'll be able to go through those and think about, where am I in my career? What are my most important responsibilities? What do I value most right now in my life? And what is most important for me to negotiate? And so then you're going to want to include what are your 3 most important goals for negotiating. And then you want to draft your open-ended what and how questions to gain more info on your offer. So the purpose behind asking these open-ended questions is to demonstrate understanding and empathy for their situation while gaining more information about how they structured this offer and determined your compensation, your offered compensation. So these are the same examples that we went through in the slides, but these are, some examples of what and how based on the company you're talking to, who you're actually talking to. Because if you're talking to the recruiter, you might be asking very different what and how questions than if you're talking to who your direct boss would be. Okay. And then you want to ask yourself the goals. So what am I trying to uncover in this first conversation? Well, what's most important for them? And what constraints might the other side have? So the company might have. Where might they be flexible in this offer negotiation? How is compensation determined, and what's the all-in compensation? And then what other benefits or incentives are most notable or most important to think through for the offer? So you can draft your questions down here. And then the next thing you want to do is prepare how you'll position your proposal to align with their interests. So proposal 1, this is kind of your most important proposal, what you're most focused on achieving. And then your second proposal and your third proposal. And you're going to want to think through about, well, 1, how does this align with their interests and how you'll benefit their team? Because again, if you're not talking in terms of their interests, you're trying to influence someone based on something other than their self-interests. Well, if they know, or if they want somebody who's above average, and you truly do believe that based on your past performance and what you know that you're going to be able to contribute to the team, and you believe that that's above average, well, it would make sense that, if you're bringing the above average skill and talent, that you'd like to propose an above average salary. Well, they know that in terms of their self-interest, they're hiring someone who's above average. That's their self-interest. They want someone who's above average. And then you also want to think through, why is this important to me? And this is important for you to think through because sometimes people might just make asks, but they're empty asks. They don't really want it, and there's no really reason behind it. Well, if you get into the conversation and they start asking you, well, why is this important to you? Well, if your only reason is I just want to make money, well, that's not necessarily a good reason. A better reason would be that you believe that you offer an above average performance for whatever this position is. You've done your research. You're confident in what the average or median fair market compensation range is for the position, and you would like to propose being compensated above that because you believe that you are not average. Okay, so, and then also, I've included down here a reminder. Compensation proposals should always be proposed as a range. You never want to say, I'd like to propose a compensation of, or a base salary of 80,000. Give them a range. So your targeted compensation should be the low end of the range with a larger but still realistic high end. Use more precise and exact numbers to make it appear more thoroughly researched. For example, assume you've been offered 75,000. So the offer you received is 75K for a base salary. If you're targeting a position that has an average fair market value of 80,000 and the compensation ranges from 70,000 to 90,000 based on compensation data, you might choose to propose a range of 81,750 to 86,250. By using more precise numbers like this, like 81,750 and 86,250, more precise numbers, it gives the impression that you've done your research. So someone who just says, 70 to 90 or 75 to 80, it sounds like you're just pulling numbers out of thin air. So you want to use slightly more precise numbers. Now, it might sound awkward when you first say it, and you might be worried like the recruiter or the manager is going to think I'm crazy, but that's not how they're going to think. They're going to think this person's done research, and they're giving us a precise range for a reason. That's what you want them to believe. Okay, so now 5, outline their expected responses and how you'll respond to them. So I want to quickly walk through some of the ones that I've included here, but this is by no means all-encompassing. And based on the industry you're in, the company you're in, how is the company a small company, a medium-sized company, or is it a Fortune 500? I mean, there's going to be very different ways that you could think through what are their expected responses and how do I want to prepare for them. But, all right, so always be pleasant, respectful, and understanding. At no point in the negotiation should you become emotional or get defensive, argumentative, or make accusations. The easiest way to absolutely destroy a negotiation is get emotional. Get defensive, become argumentative, or start throwing out the fair card. This isn't fair, or I believe this is fair. That will blow up the negotiation. So you don't want to do that. Instead, you want to have a tonality of curiosity, genuine interest, and a more kind of like a help me understand. Like, help me understand. How are you thinking about this? How did you guys come up with this? That's pleasant, respectful, understanding, and a help me understand. Okay, so they say there's no room in the budget. Okay, so it sounds like the company might have some constraints for this position. And then wait for several seconds to see if they chime in with more info. If after 3 to 5 seconds they don't say anything, then ask another question. What were the most important factors when determining the offered compensation? So if you listen to my tone, I don't sound accusational, I don't sound aggressive, and I don't sound argumentative. And I also don't sound defensive. It's more of a curiosity tone. So there's no room in the budget. Okay, so it sounds like the company might have some constraints for this position. That's a genuine, fair statement. And then you want to leave a couple seconds for them to chime in. And the reason that you're kind of saying this statement is this is empathetic. So they say there's no room in the budget. This is you understanding and showing them that you understand their position, their current perspective. Sounds like the company might have some constraints for this position. And then you stop talking. And the reason you stop talking, it might feel totally awkward because whenever there's silence in a conversation, someone immediately tries to jump and fill the gap because silence is uncomfortable. Don't fill the silence. Wait 3 to 5 seconds. Because by you waiting for 3 to 5 seconds, they're most likely going to chime in and share more information. With that information, you'll learn more, and then for the second conversation, you're going to have a better idea of how to approach it. So, if they don't chime in after 3 to 5 seconds, well, that's going to be an extended silence. At that point, you want to have your follow-up question prepared. So, what were the most important factors when determining this offered compensation? That has a tone of curiosity. You're trying to understand how did they come up with this number. Okay, so we've offered you our standard benefits and compensation package for this position. Okay, so it sounds like it might put you or someone else in a tough spot because of how others on the team are compensated. Again, you're stating that you understand why they've said this. It's empathy. It's you showing that you understand their perspective again. And then again, wait a couple seconds, and they're most likely going to elaborate. And they're going to share more information, which is going to give you a better understanding of their position. Now, if they don't chime in, maybe you ask another question following that. So, how has the team adjusted offers in the past to work with people who bring, say, different levels of skills and experiences? And then allow them to answer that question. All right, so it's a tough economy right now, and we can't go any higher. Understood. So it sounds like the company's focused on conserving cash right now, given the tight economy. Again, you're showing them that you understand their perspective, where they're coming from. It's empathy. And now, wait a couple seconds, and then they're most likely going to chime in with more information and share more info with you. Well, great. Now you have more information to make a more strategic proposal later on, or to engage in the conversation in a different way going forward. Okay, so if they don't respond, then maybe you have another question prepared, something along the lines of, how has the team worked with people in the past on their benefits and comp packages when the cash compensation isn't an option? So what you're doing is you're opening up the understanding that, okay, so because it's a tough economy and the company's conserving cash, okay, well, if cash compensation isn't an option, how else has the team worked with people on their benefits and comp packages? Maybe they're willing to negotiate something else. Maybe they're willing to negotiate vacation time or paid time off or a larger benefit package or a larger bonus or some other type of performance compensation. That's where, by asking this question, you might open doors of additional opportunity. So we've done our research and know the going rate for this position. This is a fair offer. So they've dropped the F-bomb. That's how you want to think about the word fair. Fair is a tricky word. It's the F-bomb because, remember, fair is determined on something. We don't know what fair is unless we know how it's being determined. Because fair could be subjective, or fair could be based on an objective source of data. And we need to know which is which. So if we say, or if they say, we've done our research and we know the going rate for this position, this is a fair offer, you might respond with something like, got it. So it sounds like the team researched the market data and looked at what other companies are offering for this position. Wait a couple seconds, see if they chime in with anything and share any additional info. But then you might want to ask a question along the lines of, how did the team determine what fair compensation was for this position? Was it primarily based on the market average? Because what you're doing is you're trying to understand, how did they choose this number? Because if it was based on the market average, well, again, you don't believe that you're an average professional. You believe that you bring above average ability and value to the team, and you'd like to propose being compensated above average. So, and then the other thing is, if it sounds like they haven't done any market data, or if they say that they bring up that, well, we've looked at the market data and we know that it's between this range and this range, well, you've already done your own analysis. So if the numbers that you're telling you are really far off from the research that you've done and what you're seeing on your end, that's where you might want to introduce, well, if you wouldn't mind, I'd be really happy to share with you the comp analysis that I've done and the numbers that I'm seeing and believe represent a better fair market value, or represent what I believe to be fair market value for this position. At that point, it's trying to understand who's using what data and how is fair being determined. Fair is a tricky word. Consider it the F-bomb. All right, so we can't do that. You might get a manager or a recruiter or someone who just says, I'm sorry, we can't do that. Well, this is a very blunt statement, and it doesn't give you a whole lot to work with. So you don't want to just say, okay, and then just shut down the negotiation. That's what they're hoping for. So instead, keep the conversation going. And the way that you can do that is say, we can't do that. Okay, so it sounds like that might be a non-negotiable part of this offer. Well, do you see what that little small statement has done? You've isolated one thing, one proposal that you've asked as a non-negotiable part of the offer. Perhaps other things are negotiable, and they might bring that up. So you say, okay, so it sounds like that might be a non-negotiable part of this offer. Wait a couple seconds, they might chime in with something, And if they don't chime in, then you could say a follow-up question along the lines of, well, what would need to happen for that to potentially become negotiable? Maybe they have ideas of how it could be negotiated. Or maybe you ask something along the lines of, what other options can be discussed if this part of the offer is non-negotiable? And they might bring up that other parts of the offer are negotiable. And then finally, so we don't believe you fall on that point in the salary range. So let's say that you've proposed that you believe you bring above average value based on, and would like to propose being compensated above average. If they respond, well, we don't believe you fall in that point in the salary range, that's a miscommunication between the belief about the value that you're bringing to the team. So what you want to say is something along these lines. And again, it's not defense. Some people get really emotional about this. They would immediately get defensive and start trying to justify themselves. The moment you get defensive and start trying to justify, you've lost, not even lost, it's just you blow up the negotiation. So never allow yourself to get defensive or emotional. Instead, you want to try to understand their perspective. Again, it's all about their perspective. So you say something like, got it. So it seems like the team may have hesitations about my ability to perform above average in this position. Allow them to fill in the details. Allow them to share why they believe that. Where is that coming from? You want to know what is their hesitation, because that might provide the opportunity for you to overcome that hesitation. And then if you are able to overcome it, well, now hopefully they might be willing to compensate above average. All right, so wait a couple seconds, and if they don't, then you might follow up with a question along these lines. So what would I need to demonstrate to the team, or what performance metrics would I need to achieve to ensure that for the team I justify that point in the salary range? And again, you never know what they're going to say to something like that, because they might completely open up about their thoughts about the value you bring, about potential changes to compensation. It opens up a whole nother conversation. Okay. So note, based on your conversations with the team and the proposed offer you've been sent, brainstorm additional objections/responses you might receive. Then think through how you'd like to respond to demonstrate your understanding. So demonstrating the understanding is kind of this first empathy-driven statement. And then respond with a follow-up question that you would ask. And so the follow-up question is kind of the second part. Okay. So now, and also if we're working one-on-one, we're going to be practicing this repeatedly to make sure that you're ready for that conversation. So, all right, define at what point you'll leverage position research and competitive offers. So we talked a little bit about this in part 2, but I've re-included this in here so that you have immediate access to this. And you don't want to immediately slap down the fact that you have other competitive offers, because that almost can come across as too aggressive. Instead, what you want to do is make your proposal. And then if they counter the proposal or aren't willing to work with you, then you start to bring in some more of the research, maybe your valuation research, or the fact that you have other competitive offers that are offering higher salaries or higher or better benefits packages, whatever. Okay, 7, know your walk away point. We talked about that. And then 8, practice asking questions and responding to ensure correct tonality and body language. So similar to how you prepared and practiced for your interview, you'll want to do the same for your negotiation prep. Record yourself, listen to how you sound, and adjust your tonality to make sure you're coming across as pleasant, respectful, understanding, and reasonable. And your questions should not be rhetorical questions, cornering questions, or make them feel the need to become defensive. When asking questions, make sure your tonality is curious and genuine, coming across as if you were asking, please help me understand. So what I mean by a rhetorical question is someone says, well, that's fair, isn't it? Well, that's a totally loaded question, because they're immediately implying that you need to say yes. And if you don't, now we have a problem. So a rhetorical question is you want to be, you can ask the same question, and based on the tonality that you say it in, it might be interpreted by them as a rhetorical question or as a genuine, please help me understand question. Always make sure that your tonality is and I know I'm really beating tonality down on this, bring it up so many times. Negotiation is so heavily determined by tonality and how you are communicating in terms of body language or tonality. Super important to make sure you're practicing so that your tone sounds genuine, respectful, and in a curiosity-driven tone. Okay. And now finally is in terms of reaching out to ask for that first conversation to kick things off. I've included a basic example of an email that you might send to the recruiter, the team manager, whoever. I recommend responding to the email thread that you already have with them going, and something along these lines. So, hi, Emily, I hope your week has been going well. Thank you again for extending the and then position title offer. I'm very excited for the opportunity and would love to work with your team. I've had a chance to carefully review the offer and would like to ask several questions for clarification. I know you're busy, but are you free sometime in the next few days to discuss the offer? Please let me know when would work best for you. Thanks again, and then your first name. So this is a really great way to reach out and initiate the conversations and why you want to talk over the phone. Some people say, oh, just negotiate over email. Don't do that. You want to, for two reasons. One, it's less effective, but then two, for your own personal self-development, it is significantly better to begin to build the muscle to have these tough conversations. A lot of people run and fear these types of conversations. They will always be limited in life, in their career, because they haven't built the emotional muscle, but then also the confidence to enter these types of tough conversations. This is a skill set that you need to develop, and it's super, super important for your leadership abilities, for your communication, but then also for advancing and accelerating your career and your life. So never shy away from these types of tough conversations. Awesome. All right, so this is all I've got for Module 10, and that's the end of Part 3. So go ahead, start working on all that, and in Module 11, what we're going to be focusing on, and in Module 11, it's assumed that you're already in the position, you've accepted the offer, you're starting in the position either that week or sometime soon. And in Module 11, we're focused on how can you set yourself up in the first 30 days to have an excellent year, an outstanding year, and put yourself in the position to renegotiate or negotiate for either higher compensation, a better salary, a better bonus, or a title change or something, or just a further opportunity, an opportunity to lead a team, a project, something. But we want to set you up in the first 30 days to master that year, that first year, the first 6 to 12 months, so you can negotiate for more at the end of the year and accelerate your life and career. So I'll see you in Module 11.